Hello, everyone, and welcome to Embodied Prosperity, a retreat designed for women entrepreneurs. This is for visionaries, leaders, healers, coaches, transformational facilitators, and really anyone who is seeking to embody their natural state of prosperity in all facets of business and life. And the potent conversations held within this sacred container will act as a portal, inspiring new ways of shifting your awareness and elevating your inner frequency so that you can attract the abundance that you are. So today's speaker has had a really, really profound effect on me, my own work, my own healing journey. She's such a beautiful soul, and she's owned her healing gifts, and I'm so grateful for that. She's a channel, she's a quantum creatrix, which is such a beautiful archetype to embody. And I'm just so grateful she's doing what she's doing because it's so needed in this world right now. And so with no further ado, her name is Janet Raftis. Welcome, Janet.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Kay. I'm so grateful to be here.
Yes, welcome, Janet. I'm so grateful that you're here. So a little bit about Janet. Janet Raftis is a master healer, psychic medium, and magic maker. As a quantum creatrix, she works with the divine feminine and the energy of source potential to support her clients in achieving deep and powerful transformations that alleviate and heal physical, mental, and emotional symptoms. And I can really attest to that. Along with Ina Lucas, her quantum playmate, she is co-founder of Kairos Healers Academy, a year-long magical trade school for the healing and intuitive arts. Janet and Ina also facilitate powerful shamanic channeled activations that follow the wheel of the year, and they lead sacred activation retreats worldwide. Beautiful, beautiful work. So, Janet, your title for your talk today is Activating Abundance Through the Sacred Art of Pleasure. And I love this topic. It's very near and dear to my heart. It's something that I'm studying. Actually, I'm working to include more embodied pleasure practices and all of that that good stuff into my work. So I'm really excited to dive into it. But I was wondering if we could go into a little bit about your journey into healing, into really just owning your gifts, and becoming this highly successful entrepreneur that you are today.
Yeah, thank you. For sure. I mean, it has been quite a journey. And it's been about 2 decades long now that I've been really in my own healing process. And, to refer back to the title of my talk today, I mean, pleasure did not come naturally to me. So I, after I had my son, when I was 33, I realized that my life was not manageable. I was incredibly traumatized. I had so much PTSD, and it was not just affecting the way that I thought and lived in the world, my anxiety. I was having a lot of physical symptoms that were a result of it as well. This is from sexual trauma as a teenager and as a very young child, and a lot of resultant trauma that came through addiction and poor decision making, and always pushing myself to live on the edge, basically. So, I really started this journey. I didn't start it thinking I was going to heal others or, support others in their healing journey. I started it because I was like, I can't fucking do this anymore. Like, really, it was desperation.
Yeah. And at what point did you kind of start to just own the fact that you were this highly sensitive soul, this intuitive, this empath, and own that these were gifts that you were given to like help serve the world? At what point did that occur for you?
So that, I think right around when I had my awakening at that time, a lot of things happened all at the same time. I read this book called The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. And when I read that book, which is basically a scientific explanation of this world that I live in now, right? And I read the book and I was like, oh my God, I'm not crazy. Right. Like it was telling me about myself. So that was the moment that I realized I've always been really sensitive. I've always been psychic. I've always like felt what everybody was feeling. And I just thought I was insane. And so that then the series of synchronicities led me to a Reiki master. I was living in a very small town in Costa Rica at the time. I came across this Reiki master. I ended up training with her. And again, like I said, I did it because I was, I felt like I couldn't go on anymore. But it was about 2 years in that I really was realizing I want to do more with this. I am highly sensitive. I need to figure out how to work with that. And I really, really love this thing that I'm doing, even though I didn't have, a big grasp on what that was yet. But I would say that was when it started. I didn't fully claim my gifts though. So that was, I became a Reiki master like 19 years ago, but I didn't fully claim my gifts until probably 7 or 8 years ago. I mean, I was working mostly full time about 10 years ago, but still very almost trepidatiously. Like I was good at it. I was incredibly psychic. People were having amazing results. It was awesome. But I was like, I don't know. I was still not able to really I couldn't claim abundance. I couldn't claim my value, my worth yet. And so around 10 years ago, probably 9 years ago, I again had a series of sort of really intense initiations around some personal relationships I had. And one was romantic and one was in business. And what I realized in that was that I was the common denominator. And that if I was giving my power away, I was never going to be able to thrive in my life. And so I, at that point in time, I really doubled down, basically. I really said, okay, I'm just spirit. I am going to do whatever I need to do. Show me and support me and help me. And that was when I really started to heal the witch wound, I guess, And so I started to really claim my aptitude in this field. I started to share that I was doing it in a broader scale. And I also got to a point where I was like, I'm sick of scraping by. I'm sick of not wondering how rent is going to come together. I mean, it always was, but just barely. There was lots of pain, beat the bank with the checks, and I was tired of living that way. And so I really, at that point, I really upped everything and just said, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to go all in because I can't lose if I go all in, right? But if I continue to do this, I'm not, I'm not feeling fulfilled. I was not feeling fulfilled. There was no pleasure in my life. It was all sort of scarcity. And so that was when I really shifted, massive shift. And then within a few years, I was working with a coach and had my first 6-figure year and was finally moving into a healthy relationship. And, my whole world changed. It was revolutionary.
Amazing. I love it. I love the journey. And I think so many of us can relate to this identity of the broke healer. And, and it's this time is so over. It's we need to just go all in like you did. It's time to rise up and go all in. And actually, to dovetail from that, I briefly wanted to touch on an activation, a 3-day activation that you led with Ina called Sacred Wealth Creation, which for me was so impactful, so profound, so deep, so transformative. And I'm sure for everyone who participated. And it's strongly connected to the theme of, embodying prosperity. And so I wanted to know from you, just at what point did you begin to feel that it was time to bring in this wealth consciousness teachings into your work, into your activations? And why do you think it's so necessary in our world today?
Yeah. So it's probably been 3 or 4 years since I've started bringing it more into my work. I think I needed to feel solidly on the other side of it in order to do that. I didn't feel, I've been studying wealth for a long time, right? I mean, longer than the time I've had it, going back to like listening to Abraham and, all of those things, right? And so I think I started bringing it in, like I said, 3 or 4 years ago. And then, when Ina and I started doing our work together, it was definitely there. Ina had done actually a lot more work with her collective that she channels, the Alchemists, in this realm than I had. And mine was mostly coming through the Divine Feminine. So it's been about 3 or 4 years. And then I would say that, the more work I do, and the more embodied my prosperity is. I love the way that, I love how you brought this in, that embodied prosperity, right? The more embodied it is, the more I'm able to really hold those frequencies and activate those frequencies in others, right? So there's a lot of wealth consciousness work out there, but if the person that is facilitating it isn't actually holding that frequency, that's not what's being transmitted, right? And so that's like a really important thing. If you're in this realm of how can I activate this within me, is that you find a teacher, a healer, you find people to surround yourself with that actually are holding and activating and embodying that frequency themselves.
Yes, that is so key. That's what I've found too. And that's why it's all about like that limbic resonance, that frequency that you're holding as the healer, as the mentor, that can be like through osmosis transferred to the student. So yeah, that's really, really key. Let's dive into pleasure. The sacred art of pleasure. It's funny because I have some reminders on my phone that pop up throughout the day to remind me of just like to get into a different frequency. And it's one that just popped up right now, 1 minute ago says, I open to receive limitless pleasure now. Yes.
Yeah, totally. Being from spirit there. One thing that I have really come to understand myself in this process, and this opened up for me when I started working with the Divine Feminine, right? It was not really on my radar before then. And to be honest, like when I first started working with the Divine Feminine, Venus, Aphrodite, like they were like, oh, it was hard for me. I was like not super comfortable for that there. And part of that is my history of being sexually abused. I've had to do a lot of healing around that. And then, being really messed up around sex as a result of that, like feeling that sex was power a lot more than it was genuine pleasure. But also, it came from a lot of wounding that I think a lot of us women have around being indoctrinated into this belief that pleasure is somehow bad, that pleasure is selfish, that pleasure is dirty, that pleasure is this thing that, yeah, exactly. Like there's a lot of stigma around it. And to really be able to shift that, oh my God, it takes a lot of healing. If you are someone who, like me, has a lot of fear and shame. Like I used to have a lot of shame around feeling pleasure. And so working with the Divine Feminine really supported me in shifting that, and really actually working with Venus a lot and opening myself up to her frequencies and allowing myself to start receiving. Because the thing about pleasure and why it is so closely associated with abundance is that pleasure is receiving. It is allowing yourself to be open, receptive, and available to receive something that feels good to you. And if you are available to feel good to money or whatever type of abundance, right? It could be an abundance in relationship, in love, in books, in nature around you, whatever. But if you are open up to receiving and feeling the pleasure of that, like money wants to come to someone who feels pleasure around receiving it, right? Like, oh, yes, come on, baby, like that facilitates it because you're doing this, right? And you're relaxed. Pleasure is relaxed. It's open. It's saying, yes, I deserve to feel good, and that is, it took me a long time to couple that to abundance. I was trying to will my way into abundance. I am open to receive. I'm open to receiving $1,000 this week. Really like.
And I need it like now, like yesterday.
Right, exactly. I'm open to receiving by 4 o'clock. So, it wasn't working very well. And that's why, when we are money, it's so integral to our society. We have to have it. It is the current paradigm we live in. In the 3D, money is the form of exchange that we have. And so for now, that's what we've got. It's what we've got to work with, right? And it does provide us with so much opportunity for healing because it is so integral and important. It is abused, it is misused, it is vilified, it is martyred. There's so much to money, right? And I've never met anyone who didn't have some issue with it in some way, shape, or form, whether you have a lot of it or a little of it, right? And so, or anywhere in between. And so, to be able to come to this realization that it wasn't, when you're in will, or when you're in anxiety, or when you're in stress, which is what money activates within us a lot, right? Because I have to have X amount in order to do X thing, right? We crash the system. So at the very moment we need to be open, we crash and we do this. And so it's really hard. Money can weasel its way in, but it's really hard, right? And so whatever your belief is what will actually, my belief was, I always managed to get by. So what was happening was that I was always managing to get by at the last minute. Right? Like the last $50 for rent would come in like miraculously, right before, the check went through. Because that was my belief system. And I was closed to everything else. So when I started really opening up and allowing myself to experience pleasure, not necessarily with money, but pleasure in my everyday life, right? Pleasure with my plants. Oh my God, I love my plants. Like just being around my plants and like, oh, I love them. They're so cute. I get to take care of them. Pleasure being around my dog or my cat. Pleasure being with my partner, not necessarily even with sex, though that was definitely a part of it, but like just being able to surrender to my partner and open myself up to receiving from him in other ways, receiving compliments from him, receiving his touches, right? His hugs, being able to receive from Gaia, going outside and being like, oh my God, Gaia, thank you for this beautiful sunset. Thank you for this rain today, right? Like whatever it was, like to be able to receive. When a big thing for me was that I wanted to be able to shop at Whole Foods. Like I wanted to be able to buy organic food that was like nourishing for my body. And I used to always like crash when I would go to the grocery store. I'd like be at the checkout and I'd be like, oh my God, it's $200, and at some point in time I was like, I have to change that, right? And so I started working with like, oh, I'm so grateful that I had the money for this food that's so nourishing to me, and I started to feel pleasure in the nourishment that I was getting from food, right? Oh my God, this fruit tastes so good. And oh my God, this is like such, this is so good for me. And I'm exaggerating it a little bit here for the purpose of the discussion, but it was a practice I had of allowing myself to feel pleasure around the food I was putting into my mouth instead of just, eating in a rush or on the run or standing up while I did something else. Little pockets of my life that before I had been not present to, I started to create experiences of pleasure. And through that, it's like you hit a tipping point, right? And then different things start to unlock and release and unlock and release, right? So as I started opening up to more pleasure, I started to draw in more pleasurable things. And I started to draw in the means to experience more pleasurable things, right? It was like the actual dollar count wasn't the primary focus. Pleasure was the primary focus, and being open and receptive to pleasure. And then the dollars were coming in to support that. And because I was open.
It's so beautiful. I'm just picturing like, like a hose with a kink in it, or 2 kinks and 3 kinks. And you can just like loosen those kinks with this like opening up, receiving the pleasures, like the smallest, simplest pleasures, like just getting on the floor with your dog and feeling her fur, and like smelling the fireplace that's right nearby. Like these things activate that frequency of abundance that you're talking about, and that get you there where you need to be. And it, like you said, it's not the money. That's not the goal. It's like the goal is elevating your frequency, opening up, allowing, receiving, so that windfall of, water through the hose, or money coming down and raining down on you, can happen, can take place with ease and grace.
Yeah. And the other thing about pleasure too that I really noticed was when I was feeling pleasure, I was not feeling angst. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so like 2-year notification that just came up, right? Like so often, well, sometimes we need the reminders, really. Like I look at reminders all over the place too. But we get stuck in that worry and the anxiety, and we don't realize how long we get stuck there, right? Like once we enter in it, we don't realize it. So if you are reminding yourself to experience pleasure throughout the day, and you're like, oh, my cup of tea, I'm going to enjoy my cup of tea. Well, all of a sudden, you're just present to your cup of tea. You're present to the experience of the tea and the taste of it and the smell, the warmth. And you're not in the worry frequency anymore. So just like that, you've completely shifted your frequency. You've completely elevated it. The more you do that, then the more you spend in that open receptive frequency than you do in the other frequency that is like a big door to the receiving. It's like when the hose is not just kinked, but like turned on itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. Yeah, totally. And so let's go into, as women in particular, do you want to speak to a little bit about, I mean, you've already touched on this, but like, why is it so difficult for us as women to really get into that embodied state of pleasure? And like, you touched on it regarding to, our sexuality, our intimacy issues, and the shame. But just, maybe if you want to speak to this a little bit more, because it's just so important, because we need to be reminded of this. Like, this is our birthright. We can be in this frequency at all times if we choose to. Mm-hmm. And if we cultivate that kind of like habit in our lives. But so frequently we can just, we go back to our default mode of just being restricted, of being in the worry, of being in the shame, the doubt, the self-consciousness, and then we disconnect from our bodies. Mm-hmm. So maybe speak a little bit about like that embodied, why it's so difficult.
Well, we're really taught that pleasure is something that happens unto the self, right? So if I'm experiencing pleasure, it is something that I am taking into myself. And in doing that, I'm not focused on the other. And girls in our society are taught to constantly shift focus away from the self, that is considered selfish, and onto others to take care of them. And it's okay for us to give other people pleasure, mm-hmm. right? There's nothing wrong with that. We cook to help other people experience pleasure. We give sexually so other people can experience pleasure. We do things for other people so that they can experience pleasure. But for us to take it is incredibly difficult. And so I think that's a big part of it, is that we've been trained literally since we were little to not take care of ourselves in that way. And that when we do put our attention on ourselves, we're being selfish. So that's a huge part of it. But, to this point too, and this just like came in from spirit, right? Is that women, we have a clitoris. It's the only sexual organ that is not focused on reproduction. It is there solely for pleasure. Solely for pleasure. It's got no other function but pleasure. And it's got millions of nerve endings in it.
8,000, right?
Right, yeah, 8,000, right? It's got so many, it's crazy. It's so sensitive. You can think about your clitoris and you can feel it, right? So, here we have this amazing, miraculous thing. And
pleasure giver,
right? Pleasure giver. And so if we weren't meant to experience pleasure, why would we have that? That is sexual pleasure, but the analogy works across the board, right? If we weren't meant to have pleasure, why would we have a clitoris?
I love it. A woman to that. It's true. It's truth.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, this is amazing. And I love all the links you've made between, being abundant and how easy it can actually be if we can just kind of cultivate and kind of hone ourselves towards this habit of being able to receive pleasure. So, I guess in closing, before you go into your activation, because I know you want to give us a beautiful activation with Venus. I wanted to ask you, because I ask most of my speakers this question, and I would be curious what your answer is. In terms of like a sacred feminine archetype that you most identify with, and I'm sure it shifts and changes throughout time, but how do you believe embodying that archetype will change the way, women do business, how they can receive pleasure, how they can, become abundant or embody their abundance. And as a result, it would be changing the economy and ultimately our world. So yeah, what sacred feminine archetype? Because that's, for me too, the archetypes are like, they're a main thread in my work. And so I'm curious to know.
Yeah. I would say my primary archetypes are medicine woman and mystic. I also work a lot with dark goddess energy.
Yeah.
I had to work at lover archetype. I had to work to embody it. And I think that's the beauty of archetypes, is that we will resonate most strongly with one or another or a combination. But we can work with any of them. I came to pleasure through discipline, of and saying I want to activate this archetype in me. It's important to me to activate this archetype in me. And by working with divine feminine energies that were resonant with the archetypes, such as Venus.
That's beautiful. I love that answer. And I love how you pointed out the discipline piece around creating that habit of pleasure, because it doesn't come naturally, sadly, to most of us, because we're so conditioned and brainwashed to just stray far away from pleasure and believing we deserve it. So, and I'm encountering that myself in my own healing journey and my own embodied experience of pleasure and cultivating it in my life. It's I know that I should wake up early and, do my jade egg practice and, whisper, do some yoni whispering and talk to her and speak to her and hear what she has to say and all that. It's but of course, I will kind of fall off the wagon sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's what you said, it's about kind of being this is what I want. I want to develop this in my life. It's very important to me. And it's if you're serious about, creating wealth, if you're serious about being prosperous and living an amazing life, this is the gateway. This is pretty much the gateway, opening up to pleasure, allowing yourself to receive it, and understanding that your relationship with it is elevating your frequency to such a beautiful, beautiful vibration that is in total harmony with the abundance that you seek. It's like, just do it. And it's pleasure. At the end of the day, it's like, we have to beat ourselves over the head to get to pleasure. But it's like, you know, that's how twisted our society is and how all of the, you know, that we've experienced. But yeah, I really appreciate that reminder that it does require some discipline. And then ultimately, I think in your story, when you were sharing your story, you did say that, you know, as you build this kind of like appreciation and desire for more pleasure in your life, the more pleasure shows up. So I think it gets easier. You know, I think that in the beginning, it's harder to develop that habit, just like with anything. But it does get easier, and then you get more abundant and you get more pleasure. And so it's an upward cycle.
It is an upward cycle. And it really requires discipline and surrender, right? There's a piece there about relaxing the body. You know, like, for example, we'll just use sex again as the analogy, right? If you're tensed up to receive your lover, and I'm going to use, you know, male, female dynamic for this analogy. But of course, no matter what your sexual preference is, you're receiving from your partner. But I'm going to use penis, vagina for this particular example. Okay. If you're tensed up, then you're dry, you're tight, and the partner can't get in, or the partner has to force his way in, right? Whereas when you're ripe, right? When you're open and you're surrendered and you're willing to take in the pleasure, you're soft, you're open, you're lubricated, right? And that's what we want to be. We want to be soft, open, and lubricated to receive.
Yes. And just in our everyday life. So we want to walk around like that.
Totally. For everything, not just money, right? And not just a penis, but, you know, like.
I love it. But it's true. It's true. And it does come down to the surrender too. I love that you brought that in and the juiciness, that lubrication, like that we want that flow. We want it to flow. We want it to be easeful. We don't want to be efforting in our lives, especially, you know, as women, we can really tap into that feminine energy that we have within us. You know, especially if we're strongly identified with our feminine energy, you know, it can improve every aspect of our lives, including our businesses, the way we run our businesses. Like, we can become that magnetic.
Yes.
And then we're magnetizing our soulmate clients versus like going out there and trying to find them. And
I will find them.
Here, we need you.
Totally.
I love it, Janet. So let's get into the activation if you're willing to lead us through that. I can't wait for this.
Yeah, so great. So if you haven't done an activation before, this is not a meditation. It is an actual energy activation. It works all the way down to a cellular genetic level. I'm going to be working with frequencies from source with the goddess Venus and transmitting those frequencies, channeling those frequencies, and also working with your guides, of course, and your spirit team to bring about whatever change you need. So even though this is a group activation, know that you will receive exactly what you need. And the words that are coming out of my mouth, they may be completely pertinent to you. They may not. It's okay. Just relax, open, receive, allow for the juiciness of it to happen, because spirit, Venus, your guides, they all know exactly what you need. Don't listen to this portion while you're driving or operating any heavy machinery or anything like that. Find a nice little, if you need to pause this and go somewhere cozy where you can relax, you can be sitting up or lying down. Even though it's going to be short, 10-ish minutes, you might fall asleep. And if you do, that's also totally okay. You will still receive it. And sometimes you may even need to be offline in order for the frequencies to bypass your consciousness. So I think that covers about it.
Okay, we are ready.
All right. So go ahead and close your eyes. And just start by dropping into your breath, dropping into your lower body, into your belly, and just allowing your stomach to gently rise on your in-breath and gently fall on your out-breath. And as you breathe, sense yourself in your body. So just noticing your body, having awareness of your body, feeling the presence of your body here and now. As you breathe, open yourself up and state your declaration of willingness. I am willing to receive this healing. I am open to receiving exactly what I most need today. Claim it with a big old yes. Venus is here, and we are bringing to you frequencies of pleasure, frequencies that activate the experience of pleasure within you, frequencies that are going to travel through your body and activate pleasure centers throughout your entire being. And so open yourself up to the allowance of this. And as you do so, allow for the frequencies that are coming into your crown right now. Feel them sliding into your crown and feel them slowly moving through your body. And as they move through your body, these frequencies are beginning to wake up little receptors, little nerve endings within your body, waking them up, reminding you of how sensitive you are, of how pleasure sensing you are, that you have the capacity to experience even more pleasure. Most of you have dulled yourself to your capacity for pleasure. Out of your fear of pain, you have dulled your capacity to experience pleasure. You have shut down your receptors, or you have dimmed them as if you were dimming a light. And now we ask you here, are you willing? Are you willing to turn up those sensors once again? Are you willing to remember the power of pleasure in your life? And if so, say yes as we begin to turn those receptors on with you, allowing these frequencies to flow through your body. And as they flow through your body, the awareness of I am a pleasure seeker. I am a pleasure seeker, and allowing yourself here to really drop into I am a pleasure seeker. As you do that, we are going to activate the frequencies of I am a pleasure seeker within you. I am a pleasure seeker. These frequencies are reaching all the way down into your root. All the way down into your root, and they are flowing through your root and sacral areas. I am a pleasure seeker, activating all the way into the yoni and all the way up into your heart and beyond, opening up this line of pleasure from the yoni to the heart, from the yoni to the heart. And as this pleasure line is open, feel the warmth within you as the pleasure here opens like honey, like honey. You are juicy like honey, beautiful pleasure seeker you. You were meant to experience pleasure here while in bodily form. You came here to know pleasure. You came to know a lot of things, and pleasure was definitely one of them. So allowing yourself here to expand in the pleasure that is opening up for you now. I am a pleasure seeker, and allowing that remembrance of what it is like, accessing a point in your soul's lineage, whether in a past life, a parallel life, or a future life, a point in your soul's lineage when you knew deep and profound pleasure. You may have a memory of this come online. You may not, but your soul knows, and I know, Venus know when you have experienced pleasure before. And so allowing yourself to drop into the remembrance, even if it's not a mental remembrance. Allow yourself to drop into the visceral remembrance of being a pleasure seeker. You have known this before. You have known this. And in the ever-present now, that other knowingness is a knowingness in the now. It is a knowingness in the now. All that you have ever had at any other point in time can also be known now if you so desire. I am a pleasure seeker, and allowing yourself to drop into and surrender to the beauty of pleasure that is here for you, allowing yourself to be in the juiciness of pleasure and feeling yourself held here in it. Allow yourself to be held here in the pleasure that is available for you. Everything that you desire desires you. Everything. That is the law. Everything you desire desires you. Can you reach out and touch it? And can you open up your palm to receive it? This is the question. Can you open up your palm to receive it? Can you open up your yoni to receive it? Can you open up your heart to receive it? Can you be a receiver of the pleasure? And allow us here as a collective, Venus, the divine feminine, your guides, allow us as a collective here to shower you with the potentiality of all the pleasure that is available for you. All the pleasure that you desire is available for you. And when you start to notice it, you will start to experience it. Everything will become more pleasurable. These pleasure sensors that we are turning up within you are heightening your experience of pleasure. You will smell more, feel more, sense more, taste more if you allow yourself to keep these pleasure centers turned on. The choice is yours. They are being turned on now. And you can choose to keep them on. These pleasure centers will support you in drawing pleasure to you. For when you are experiencing pleasure, you are saying to Source, you are saying to me, you are saying to your guides, yes, yes, I will take more. I will take more of this, please. For every time you feel pleasure, you say to Source, this is what I desire. This feels so good. And as a result, Source says, well, hell yes, we're going to give you more. We're going to give you more. Be open. Know that you are worthy of all that you desire, and all that you desire desires you. We're going to drop now into this question of worthiness, and we are going to go into your Akasha. We're going into your soul files, and we're going to a point when your worthiness was not allowing you to experience pleasure, to experience the fullness of pleasure. We are dropping into that state of lack of worthiness. You were never not worthy, my dear. You were never not worthy. Just by being born, you were born worthy of all of the pleasure. And so we allow you here to remember as we heal this wounding, whether it's from this lifetime or another, we are healing this wounding for you. We're going to the source of it, to the very beginning of it, to this wounding. And we are reminding you to remind yourself that pleasure would not exist if you were not meant to experience it. There would not be a word for it. There would not be a sensation for it. There would not be the experience of it if it were not meant to be so. In its meant to be so state, that means that you and everyone who is here in physical form, was meant to experience it. Not just humans, animals, plants, all sentient beings are meant to know the experience of pleasure. You are not so special that you are the only one not meant to experience pleasure. And you are so special that you are meant to experience all the pleasure you desire. And as we integrate the healing of this wounding, we bring in now frequencies of suppleness, of juiciness, of lubrication. We bring in these frequencies to loosen you up, And so we allow these frequencies to do their work, loosening you up, loosening, softening, softening, softening. Your feminine energy rising, your feminine energy activating, the embodiment of pleasure coming alive for you now. You have permission to embody pleasure. We are activating those juicy, juicy pleasure frequencies within you, making it easier for you to say yes, making it easier for you to receive, making it easier for you to call them in, receive them, and easier to enjoy them. Weaving these frequencies around you and through you, integrating them in the fabric of your being. You have always, always known pleasure. You've always known it, even if you've been stifling it, even if you've been repressing it. Even in the repression, you've known that there was a thing called pleasure that you were denying yourself. So the art of pleasure is to move through the denial and to say yes. Small moment by small moment, allowing all that we are integrating, all that you are integrating, all that you are integrating the power to say yes over and over and over again to pleasure. Dear one, do something pleasurable for yourself today. In fact, do 3 things, 5 things, 10 things that are pleasurable for yourself today. And when you wake up tomorrow, do the same. With so much love, I am yours. There's a last little note from Venus to call on her if you're struggling.
Wow. I'm still in a different vibration here.
A little gooey. We're probably all a little gooey.
Yeah. It was just so beautiful. And as you were speaking and channeling, I was envisioning myself as a serpent and just shedding that old skin and now having renewed skin that is so open to pleasure. Like I just feel new.
I love that. I love that. Oh, it's so beautiful. I know I was really feeling like everything, like amplifying all the nerve endings and like, oh, it feels so good. Yeah. Well, that's the energy too.
I love it. And I was curious as to when you were saying in your story how you work with Venus, or you began to work with Venus to kind of activate your abundance and pleasure. And I was wondering how do you work with Venus? And this is an example of that. And it's so, so potent, so beautiful.
Wow.
And so I can't wait to re-listen to it, because as with all of your activations, there's times where I really need it more than others. And so I'll just kind of put my earbuds in, and I'll even maybe be walking. I know you guys don't really recommend, I don't do it while I'm driving, but I'll be walking like just on a slow walk by myself, and just allowing the reverberations of these new vibrations and activations in my cells, like to just amplify. Yeah. And like I feel like the repeated activations really kind of, it goes deeper into the layers of the wound.
Yeah, it does. It releases more of the wounding, and it activates more deeply and integrates more deeply. And so it really does, I always recommend that people keep, the ones that really impacted the most, keep them handy. And to your point, I think it's beautiful to fully receive at least once, right? Like maybe the first time fully receive. But I have a lot of clients who walk and listen. And like you said, they're not walking out in the middle of traffic and all of that, but they like walk, and there is beauty in that. There's beauty in sometimes in the movement. Some people dance and listen to and receive the activations. When you think about like dancing, you're open, right? Like that's another place where you're open and receptive and enjoying pleasure. And so the energy is like, ooh, yeah.
Yeah. And you're like dancing with the energy, and you're receiving it, and it's coming in, and it's, You're way more open. Absolutely. I find myself moving a lot to your activations.
Yeah.
It just happens naturally, even, and then the shaking to release, and then receiving more, drinking in more. Yeah. All of that body movement is essential. Amazing, Janet. Thank you so much. This has been really, really powerful, really just enjoyable, and yeah. And did you want to tell us a little bit about like your free gift for participants?
Yeah, so I have a goddess archetype quiz. So we were just talking about goddess archetypes. So and the quiz itself is different than most quizzes or any quiz I've seen out there, in that it's almost like a meditative journey going through it. And then when you receive your archetype, I have a gift for you, which is a free meditation with a goddess of that archetype, which is a guided meditation, not an activation, but it is a guided healing meditation, about 25 minutes long. So it's a way of working with the archetype. So it's nice. Yeah. And then you also get some suggestions on other ways to work with the archetype as well.
That sounds really exciting and really generous. And yeah, I can't wait to take the quiz myself. Well, thank you again, Janet. And yeah, I'm wishing everyone who has participated in this conversation and this activation a beautiful day, and we'll see everyone next time.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.